Hare Krishna. Yeah, so it's August 28th, 2020. On the calendar, it's listed as the appearance day of Srila Jiva Goswami. I'm not completely sure whether it's today or tomorrow, but anyhow, I thought for tonight's morning program and tonight's evening program and tomorrow's evening program, we can focus something on Srila Jiva Goswami. So he's one of the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan. He was the junior member, and just a few things that Prabhupada says about Jiva Goswami. Prabhupada describes Jiva Goswami's Satsandarbhas as the most scholarly work in the world. He describes them as very highly philosophical books, and Prabhupada says Jiva Goswami was the greatest scholar until now. No one can compete with Jiva Goswami's scholarship in Sanskrit and philosophy. He's the world's best philosopher and Sanskrit scholar. The world's best philosopher and Sanskrit scholar was Srila Jiva Goswami. Many scholars come and say, Jiva Goswami was the best philosopher and scholar that ever lived in all of history. So we're clearly not dealing with an ordinary person here on all levels, whether spiritual, devotional, scholarly, philosophical. So the eldest Goswamis are Sanatan Goswami and Rupa Goswami, and Srila Jiva Goswami is their nephew. They had a third brother, Anupam, or Sri Ballabha, and his son is Jiva Goswami. And Jiva Goswami pretty much took sannyas at about 10 years old. He saw his father and uncles, they kind of left to join Lord Chaitanya's movement. And he was 10, it says 10 or 12 years old. And so he left and dedicated everything to Lord Chaitanya. So there's a song, a bhajan that Prabhupada was very fond of, called the Sri Sad Goswami Astika. So I thought we can sing that bhajan, and we can sing that bhajan because it's glorifying the 6 Goswamis. It's glorifying the 6 Goswamis, and you might have it in your song books, but I'm going to try to share it here. Yes. Okay. Did I do it? Okay. So I think I shared my screen. Yeah, good. All right. So we can sing this responsively if we'd like. So it's about the 6. It's glorifying the 6 Goswamis. Krishna Kirtana Gana Nartana Paro Premamritambo Nidhi. Krishna Kirtana Gana Nartana Paro Premamritambo Nidhi. Dhira Dhira Jana Priyo Priyakara Nirmatsara Pujito. Dhira Dhira Jana Priya Priyakara Nirmatsara Pujito. Sri Chaitanya Kripa Barao Bhuvi Bhuvo Bhava Bahantarakao. Sri Chaitanya Kripa Barao Bhuvi Bhuvo Bhava Bahantaraka. Vande Rupa Sanatana Raghu Yuga Sri Jiva Gopalaka. Vande Rupa Sanatana Raghu Yuga Sri Jiva Gopalaka. Nana Shastra Vicharane Kanipuno Sadharma Samstapaka. Nana Shastra Vicharane Kanipuno Sadharma Samstapaka. Lokanam Hitakarina Tribhuvane Manyal Saranyakaro. Lokanam Hitakarina Tribhuvane Manyal Saranyakaro. Radha Krishna Padaravinda Bhajananandena Matalika. Radha Krishna Padaravinda Bhajananandena Matalika. Vande Rupa Sanatana Raghuyoga Shri Jiva Gopalaka. Vande Rupa Sanatana Raghuyoga Shri Jiva Gopalaka. Shri Gauranga Gunanuvarnana Vidal Samrit Sradha Samvidyan Vital. Shri Gauranga Gunanuvarnana Vidal Shradha Samvidyan Vital. Papotapani Quintanal Tanubitam Govinda Ganamritai. Papotapani Quintanal Tanubitam Govinda Ganamritai. Anandam Bodhi Vardanaika Nipunao Kaivalya Nistarakao. Anandam Bodhi Vardanaika Nipunao Kaivalya Nistarakao. Vande Rupa Sanatana Raghuyoga Shri Jiva Gopalaka. Vande Rupa Sanatana Raghuyoga Shri Jiva Gopalaka. Tyaktva Turnamashesha Mandalapati Shrinim Saratu Chavat. Tyaktva Turnamashesha Mandalapati Shrinim Saratu Chavat. Bhutva Dina Ganesha Kaukavunaya Kapina Kanta Shrita. Bhutva Dina Ganesha Kaukarunaya Kapina Kanta Shrita. Gopi Bhavara Samrita Abdilahari Kalola Magnamo. Gopi Bhavara Samrita Abdilahari Kalola Magnamo. Vande Rupa Sanatana Raghuyoga Shri Jiva Gopalaka. Vande Rupa Sanatana Raghuyoga Shri Jiva Gopalaka. Kujat Kokila Hamsa Sarasagana Kiyane Mayura Kule. Kujat Kokila Hamsa Sarasagana Kiyane Mayura Kule. Nana Ratna Nibadamula Vitapa Shri Yukta Vrindavane. Nana Ratna Nibadam Mula Vitapa Shri Yukta Vrindavane. Radha Krishna Maharnisham Prabhajatel Jivarta Dalya Muda. Radha Krishna Maharnisham Prabhajatel Jivarta Dalya Muda. Vande Rupa Sanatana Raghuyoga Shri Jiva Gopalaka. Vande Rupa Sanatana Raghuyoga Shri Jiva Gopalako Sankhya Purvakanama Gana Natibi Kalavasani Krita Sankhya Purvakanama Gana Natibi Kalavasani Krita Nidrahara Vihara Kadi Vijital Chajanta Dina Chaya Nidrahara Vihara Kadi Vijital Chajanta Dina Chaya Radha Krishna Gunasmite Madhurimanandena Samohita Radha Krishna Gunasmite Madhurimanandena Samohita Vande Rupa Sanatana Raghuyuga Shri Jiva Gopalaka Vande Rupa Sanatana Raghuyuga Shri Jiva Gopalaka Radha Kunda Tate Kalinda Tanaya Tire Chavam Srivate Radha Kunda Tate Kalinda Tanaya Tire Chavam Srivate Premon Madhava Sadashesha Dasaya Gastau Pramatal Sada Premon Madhava Sadashesha Dasaya Gastau Pramata Sada Gayantal Chakadehere Gunavaram Bava Vibhuta Muda Gayantal Chakadahere Gunavaram Bava Vibhuta Muda Vande Rupa Sanatana Raghuyuga Shri Jiva Gopalako Vande Rupa Sanatana Raghuyuga Shri Jiva Gopalako He Radhe Braja Devi Ke Chalalite He Nanda Sunokuta He Radhe Braja Devi Ke Chalalite He Nanda Sunokuta Shri Govardhana Kapa Padapatale Kalindi Vane Kuta Shri Govardhana Shri Govardhana Kapa Padapatale Kalindi Vane Kuta Gosanta Viti Sarvato Vrajapure Keder Mahavivala Gosanta Viti Sarvato Vrajapure Keder Mahavivala Vande Rupa Sanatana Raghuyuga Shri Jiva Gopalaka 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 Hare Krishna. Yes, okay. And okay, so now we can read the English, and maybe whoever wants to take a turn. I shared something on my screen. I'm not sure exactly what's showing. So, and there's different versions of the English, but we can read one verse at a time, take turns if anyone would like to, okay. So the first stanza. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the six Goswamis, namely Sri Rupa Goswami, Sri Sanatan Goswami, Sri Raghunath Bhatt Goswami, Sri Raghunath Das Goswami, Sri Jiva Goswami, and Sri Gopal Bhatt Goswami, who are always engaged in chanting the holy name of Krishna and dancing. They are just like the ocean of love of God, and they are popular both with the gentle and with the ruffians, because they are not envious of anyone. Whatever they do, they are all pleasing to everyone, and they are fully blessed by Lord Chaitanya. Thus, they are engaged in missionary activities meant to deliver all the conditioned souls in the material universe. Would someone like to read text 2?
Ramachandra is not doing?
Ramachandra is here. We have songbooks.
Okay, I can go. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the six Goswami, namely Sri Rupa Goswami, Sri Sanatan Goswami, Sri Raghunath Bhatt Goswami, Sri Raghunath Das Goswami, Sri Jiva Goswami, and Sri Gopal Bhatt Goswami, who are very expert in scrutinizingly studying all the revealed scriptures with the aim of establishing eternal religious principles for the benefit of all human beings. Thus, they are honored all over the three world, and they are worth taking shelter of, because they are absorbed in the mood of the gopis and are engaged in the transcendental loving service of Sri Radha and Krishna.
Number 3.
Offer my respectful obeisances unto the six Goswamis, namely Sri Rupa Goswami, Sri Sanatan Goswami, Sri Raghunath Bhatt Goswami, Sri Raghunath Das Goswami, Sri Jiva Goswami, and Sri Gopal Bhatt Goswami, who are very much enriched with understanding Lord Chaitanya and who are thus expert in narrating his transcendental qualities. They can purify all conditioned souls from the reactions of their sinful feelings by pouring upon them transcendental songs about Govinda. As such, they are very expert in increasing the limits of the ocean of transcendental bliss, and they are the saviors, the living entities from the devouring mouth of impersonal liberation.
I offer my respectful obeisances unto the six Goswamis, namely Srila Rupa Goswami, Srila Sanatana Goswami, Srila Raghunatha Bhatta Goswami, Sri Raghunatha Dasa Goswami, Sri Jiva Goswami, and Sri Gopala Bhatta Goswami, kicked off all association of aristocracy as insignificant. In order to deliver the poor conditioned souls, they accepted loincloths, treating themselves as mendicants, but they are always merged in the ecstatic ocean of the gopis' love for Krishna, and bathe always and repeatedly in the waves of that ocean.
Thank you.
I offer my respectful obeisances unto the six Goswamis, namely Sri Rupa Goswami, Sri Sanatan Goswami, Sri Raghunath Bhatt Goswami, Sri Raghunath Das Goswami, Sri Jiva Goswami, and Sri Gopal Bhatt Goswami. We're always engaged in worshiping Radha Krishna in the transcendental land of Vrindavan, where there are beautiful trees full of fruits and flowers which have under their roots all valuable jewels. The Goswamis are perfectly competent to bestow upon the living entities the greatest boon of the goal of life.
Number 6. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the six Goswamis, namely Srila Rupa Goswami, Srila Sanatan Goswami, Sri Raghunath Bhatt Goswami, Sri Raghunath Das Goswami, Sri Jiva Goswami, and Sri Gopal Bhatt Goswami, who were engaged in chanting the holy names of the Lord and bowing down in a scheduled measurement. In this way, they utilized their valuable lives, and in executing these devotional activities, they conquered over eating and sleeping and were always meek and humble, enchanted by remembering the transcendental qualities of the Lord.
With great delight, I offer my respectful obeisances unto the six Goswamis, namely Sri Rupa Goswami, Sri Sanatan Goswami, Sri Raghunath Bhatt Goswami, Sri Raghunath Das Goswami, Sri Jiva Goswami, and Sri Gopal Bhatt Goswami, who were sometime on the bank of the Radhakund lake, sometime on the shore of the Yamuna, and sometime in Vamsivat. as this song of Krishna's quality, at the places they appear just like madmen in the full ecstasy of love for him, exhibited different transcendental symptoms in their bodies, and they were immersed in ecstasy of Krishna consciousness.
Jiva Goswami, Gopalbhata Goswami, who chanted very loudly everywhere in Vrindavan, shouting, "O Queen of Vrindavan, O Queen of Vrindavan, Radharani, O Lalita, O son of Nanda Maharaj, where are you now? Are you just on the hill of Govardhan, or are you under the trees on the bank of Yamuna? Where are you?" These were their moves in executing Krishna consciousness.
Shri Shri Sad Goswami Astika ki. Srila Jiva Goswami ki. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Jai Jai Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jai Advaita Chandra Jai Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jai Jai Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jai Advaita Chandra Jai Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jai Jai Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jai Advaita Chandra Jai Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Om Ganatimirandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshurmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desha Tarine. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shiva Sadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Okay, so there's many things we can discuss and read from related to Srila Jiva Goswami. And so we just sung this profoundly beautiful song by Srinivasacharya Goswami Asika. Srila Prabhupada quotes Jiva Goswami extensively, describes him and quotes his philosophy extensively. And I mentioned Prabhupada said that the Satsandarbhas are the most scholarly work in the world. So that's from Srila Prabhupada. Let's see. Well, I'm just going to let's see where we go. I'll read a few excerpts from here and there. One story that Prabhupada shares, maybe in the purports, for sure in lectures, that there was some like scholar who was traveling around India at that time, 500 years ago or so, and he came to Vrindavan. And he approached Rupa Goswami, maybe Rupa and Sanatan, but at least Rupa Goswami. And he challenged Rupa Goswami to a Shastric debate, a scholarly debate. And Rupa Goswami could see that this person, he had no sincere interest to understand truth. He literally, just like a wrestler or a chess player, wanted to like win the tournament. And or like an athlete like challenges the top fighter. And so this person, he literally had a book, and he wanted to get a signed certificate by Rupa Goswami that I have defeated you. So then he could show I've defeated Rupa Goswami in scholarly Shastric debate. So Rupa Goswami, he was like, oh, okay, he said, you want me to sign something? Okay, I'll sign, because he didn't want to deal with this person, and he just didn't, obviously had no false ego. He said, sure, I'll sign. So he got it signed, and he was happy. He's going to leave Vrindavan with the signed certificate from Rupa Goswami, proving that he's the greatest scholar in the world. So Rupa Goswami and Sandra Goswami, they're just going on writing books, chanting Hare Krishna like that. But then Jiva Goswami, he got wind of this, and he stopped this scholar and goes, what do you have there? He goes, look, I have a signed certificate from your uncle that I defeated him. So Jiva Goswami became furious. He became furious. He said, okay, well then, okay, let's go at it. Let's go at it, and let's have a debate. And Jiva Goswami just devastated him. He just completely devastated. Then afterwards, actually, Rupa became angry at Jiva Goswami. Like, why did you do that? Why did you do that? So Rupa Goswami was angry, but he was really pleased because he really appreciated it. But he was a little angry, kind of like, come on, we don't need to do that. We don't need to play these silly games with these people. But Jiva Goswami was dedicated to preserve the honor of his uncle, Rupa Goswami. So this is one of the many pastimes of Jiva Goswami. So, okay. So this is, I'll just read a bit here. This is Adi Leela, Chaitanya Charitamrita, chapter 3, text 80. Text 80, chapter 3, Adi Leela. Bhagavata Sandarbha Grantera Mangala Charane Shloka Jiva Goswami Kariya Chena Vyakyane. Translation. In the auspicious introduction of Bhagavat Sandarbha, Srila Jiva Goswami has given the following verse as an explanation. So this is Krishna's Kaviraj about to quote Jiva Goswami in his Bhagavat Sandarbha. So it's described there are 6 Sandarbhas, but really there's 8 books. Okay, yes. So right now I'm reading from Adi Leela Chaitanya Charitamrita, chapter 3, text 80. And the verse reads, in the auspicious introduction of Bhagavat Sandarbha, Srila Jiva Goswami has given the following verse as an explanation. 380, it's 80, not 8. 3, chapter 3, text 18. And so Prabhupada quotes profusely in his lectures and writings the Sat Sandarbhas, which means 6 Sandarbhas. But actually, the original title of the whole work was Bhagavat Sandarbha. Just like the original title of Chaitanya Mangala, of Chaitanya Bhagavat was Chaitanya Mangala. That's from Vrindavan Das Thakur. So Jiva Goswami, actually, another one of the Goswamis, Gopal Bhatt Goswami, he started what became known as the Sat Sandarbhas, and his work was kind of unfinished. And Jiva Goswami, under the guidance of Rupa and Sanatan, he continued the Sat Sandarbhas. The original name for the whole work was Bhagavat Sandarbha, Bhagavan Sri Krishna. But then that changed, and it became known as the Sat Sandarbha, 6 Sandarbhas. And the Bhagavat Sandarbha is the name of one of the 6 Sandarbhas, number 2. Sandarbha, actually, Darbha means like threads or cloth. And Sandarbha actually means a tapestry, just like here a few years ago. some devotees headed by Malini arranged, I've got this tapestry of Krishna with his flute in the river Vrindavan, in the river Yamuna in Vrindavan. So Sandarbha actually means tapestry. And Darbha means thread, and san means to weave it all together. So a Sandarbha is a thesis that weaves together all the principles, weaves together all these diverse principles, weaves them together in a beautiful tapestry. That's a Sandarbha. And so there's actually 8 books that are the Sandarbhas. The first one is called Tattva Sandarbha, and the next one is Bhagavat Sandarbha. The third, and Prabhupada quotes from all of these. The third is Paramatma Sandarbha. Jiva Goswami goes deep into the nature and function of Supersoul in relation with the Jiva, the material energy, Sri Krishna. The fourth is Krishna Sandarbha. The fifth is Bhakti Sandarbha, and the sixth is Priti Sandarbha. And then Prabhupada often mentions the Krama Sandarbha. That's a 7th Sandarbha. Whereas, okay, so the Sandarbha means a tapestry. And the Sandarbhas, they're essentially, they are Jiva Goswami's commentary on the Bhagavatam. And the first 6 Sandarbhas, they're not going in chronology like first canto, second canto, third canto. They're the first 6 Sandarbhas, they take, they reference and explain and purport different key verses from all over the Bhagavatam to establish particular principles, to establish particular philosophical principles. Then the 7th Sandarbha, the Krama Sandarbha, that is a sequential commentary, just like Prabhupada starts with Srimad Bhagavatam 111, and we go through 30 volumes up to the 10th canto. So the Krama Sandarbha, which is the 7th Sandarbha, that's Jiva Goswami's sequential commentary on the Bhagavatam, starting with first canto, first chapter, first verse. Then there's what's called the Sarva Sambodhini, which is Jiva Goswami's commentary on his own first 4 Sandarbhas. The Tattva Sandarbha, Bhagavat Sandarbha, Paramatma Sandarbha, and Krishna Sandarbha. The Sarva Sambodhini is his own commentary on his Sandarbhas. And Prabhupada quotes the Sarva Sambodhini quite a bit too. Now, text 81. Yeah, thank you. We got Krishna's Kaviraj Goswami quoting Jiva Goswami from his Bhagavat Sandarbha. Anta Krishnam Bahir Goram Darshitan Gari Vaibhavam Kalar Sankirtana Dyaisma Krishna Chaitanya Mashrita. Translation: I take shelter of Lord Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is outwardly of a fair complexion, but is inwardly Krishna himself. In this age of Kali, he displays his expanses, his angas and upangas, by performing congregational chanting of the holy name of the Lord. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Srila Jiva Goswami has placed the verse from Srimad Bhagavatam quoted in text 52, Krishna Varnam Trisha Krishnam, as Sangopangasta Parshadam Yage Sankirtana Prayer Yajanti Sumedasa, as the auspicious introduction to his Bhagavat Sandarbha or Sat Sandarbha. He has composed this text, 81, which is in effect an explanation of the Bhagavatam verse as the second verse of the same work. The verse from Srimad Bhagavatam was enunciated by Karabhajan, one of the 9 great sages, and it is elaborately explained by the Sarva Sambodhini, Jiva Goswami's commentary on his own Sat Sandarbha. Anta Krishna refers to one who was always thinking of Krishna. This attitude is a predominant feature of Srimati Radharani. Even though many devotees always think of Krishna, none can surpass the gopis, among whom Radharani is the leader in thinking of Krishna. Radharani's Krishna consciousness surpasses that of all other devotees. Lord Chaitanya accepted the position of Srimati Radharani to understand Krishna. Therefore, he was always thinking of Krishna in the same way as Radharani. By thinking of Lord Krishna, he always overlapped Krishna. Sri Krishna Chaitanya, who was outwardly very fair with a complexion like molten gold, simultaneously manifested his eternal associates, opulences, expansions, and incarnations. He preached the process of chanting Hare Krishna, and those who are under his lotus feet are glorious. Hare Krishna. So in that purport, Srila Prabhupada is referencing text 52 of the same chapter. And in that text 52, Krishnadas Kaviraj quotes this very famous verse from the 11th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, 11th canto, chapter 5, text 32. Krishna Varnam Tvisha Krishnam Sangopangasya Parshadam Yadye Sankirtana Prayer Yajanti Sumeda Saha. So that verse, thank you. That verse is quoted at least 4 times directly. I'm not talking about Prabhupada's purports. In the text of Chaitanya Charitamrita, that verse is given at least 4 times in the text. And Prabhupada, that's one of Prabhupada's most quoted verse. So the translation is, very important verse. In the age of Kali, intelligent persons perform congregational chanting to worship the incarnation of Godhead, who constantly sings the name of Krishna. Although his complexion is not blackish, he is Krishna himself. He is accompanied by his associates, servants, weapons, and confidential companions. That's text 52 of chapter 3. Okay. Now in the purport, Srila Prabhupada writes, this text is from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 11, Chapter 5, Text 32. Srila Jiva Goswami has explained this verse in his commentary on the Bhagavatam, known as the Krama Sandarbha, wherein he says that Lord Krishna also appears with a golden complexion. That golden Lord Krishna is Lord Chaitanya, who is worshipped by intelligent men in this age. This is confirmed in Srimad Bhagavatam by Garga Muni, who said that although the child Krishna was blackish, he also appears in 3 other colors, red, white, and yellow. He exhibited his white and red complexions in the Satya and Treta ages, respectively. He did not exhibit the remaining color, yellow gold, until he appeared as Lord Chaitanya, who is known as Gora Hari. Srila Jiva Goswami explains that Krishna Varnam means Sri Krishna Chaitanya. Krishna Varnam and Krishna Chaitanya are equivalent. The name Krishna appears with both Lord Krishna and Lord Chaitanya Krishna. Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but he always engages in describing Krishna and thus enjoying transcendental bliss by chanting and remembering his name and form. Lord Krishna himself appears as Lord Chaitanya to preach the highest gospel. Varnayati means utters or describes. Lord Chaitanya always chants the holy name of Krishna and describes it also. And because he is Krishna himself, whoever meets him will automatically chant the holy name of Krishna and later describe it to others. He injects one with transcendental Krishna consciousness, which merges the chanter in transcendental bliss. In all respects, therefore, he appears before everyone as Krishna, either by personality or by sound. Simply by seeing Lord Chaitanya, one at once remembers Lord Krishna. One may therefore accept him as Vishnu Tattva. In other words, Lord Chaitanya is Lord Krishna himself. I'll pause and just to connect some threads. So Krishna's Kaviraj Goswami and Prabhupada, they're saying that this verse, Krishna Varnam Tusa Krishnam, and that's, if anyone's into learning shlokas, this is a good one. Krishna Varnam Tusa Krishnam, Sango Pangvasta Parshadam, Yagye Sankirtana Periyajanti Sumes Dasaha. So the entire Sandarbhas, Jiva Goswami starts with that verse, Krishna Varnam Tusa Krishnam. That's the first of his Mangala Charana. Just like Prabhupada starts Bhagavad Gita as it is with Mangala Charana, a series of verses to invoke auspiciousness by invoking the presence and blessings of the six Goswamis, of Srimati Radharani, of Krishna himself, of the Panchatattva. So similarly, Jiva Goswami starts the Sandarbhas with a Mangala Charana. And the first verse in the Mangala Charana is he's invoking the blessings and presence of Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And then we read a few minutes ago, his second verse in his Mangala Charana. I think there's about 8 verses in his Mangala Charana. So I'll read something. So the first verse we just read, the Mangala Charana. And the second verse we also read of Jiva Goswami's Mangala Charana to his entire Sandarbhas. In Kali Yuga, we take shelter of Sri Krishna Chaitanya through full participation of the self in complete kirtan, sankirtan, and other forms of devotion. He is golden without, while concealing his blackish complexion within, and he has revealed the transcendental majesty of his bodily limbs and of his integral associates. Continuing, next, Jiva Goswami in his invocation mantras, he seeks the blessings of Rupa and Sanatan, his spiritual teachers, inspirations, and uncles. All glories to Srila Rupa and Sanatan Goswamis who reside in the land of Mathura. They have engaged me in writing this book to broadcast the essential truth, tattva, regarding Bhagavan. He goes on, Jiva Goswami goes on in his invocation prayers to glorify Srila Gopal Bhatt Goswami, who was the original writer of this project. Srila Jiva Goswami says, Sri Gopal Bhatt Goswami, a friend of Sri Rupa and Sri Sanatan, born in a South Indian Brahmin family, compiled the original version of this book after extracting the essence from the works of ancient Vaishnava masters. So Gopal Bhatt Goswami, he was going deep into the writings of Ramanujacharya, Madhvacharya, Sridhar Swami, and so he really created the foundation of Jiva Goswami's Sats and Darbhas. Jiva Goswami continues in his Mangala Charana prayers. Some parts of this first book by Gopal Bhatt Goswami were in order, some were out of order, while other parts were incomplete or missing. After thorough deliberation, Sri Jiva now rewrites this book in the appropriate order. As far as I understand, Gopal Bhatt Goswami's writings, the foundation of Sansarbhas, they have not come down through antiquity. There are no copies of them. There are no copies of it. Jiva Goswami goes on in his Mangala Charana mantras to define the qualifications of someone to be able to read Satsandarbha, Bhagavat Sandarbha. Jiva Goswami writes, this book may be studied only by one whose sole aspiration is to worship the lotus feet of Sri Krishna All others are forewarned as to the implications of this investigation. It's kind of like the beginning of Bhagavatam, or even Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita. He says to Arjuna, okay, this Bhagavad Gita, it's for those who are not envious, it's not for those who are not devoted or those who are envious. Still, Prabhupada says there are some people, they're innocent, and we share Bhagavad Gita, and then they become devoted, they become qualified. Like that. Similarly, Bhagavatam starts, Srila Vyasadeva, Dharma Podita Koitavatra Pramod Nirmat Saranam Satam. Vyasadeva says, this Bhagavatam is for those devotees who are fully pure in heart, thoroughly honest. They say, oh, that's not me. Still, as long as we're guided by Srila Prabhupada in reading Bhagavatam, then we get purified. And we can expect, because in some respects, we're not qualified to read Bhagavatam or Bhagavad Gita. We're not going to get everything. And as we get more and more purified, we grasp, we realize more and more what's happening here. Next, in his auspicious Mangala Charana mantras, Jiva Goswami states, after offering obeisances to my initiating guru and to those spiritual teachers who taught me the meaning of Srimad Bhagavatam, I wish to write this book called Sri Bhagavat Sandarbha. And then before going, let's call it to the essence of Jiva Goswami's last verse, entitled Homage to Sri Krishna. Jiva Goswami states, in one feature, Sri Krishna exists as pure consciousness without any manifest characteristics and is referred to as Brahman in some portions of the Vedas. In another feature, he expands as the Purusha, who regulates the extrinsic potency Maya by his many plenary portions. In yet another of his principal forms, he is Narayan, resplendent in the spiritual sky Vaikuntha. May that Sri Krishna, the original, complete, absolute truth, Svayam Bhagavan, bestow love for himself on those who worship his lotus feet in this world. Hare Krishna. And then, so again, the first of the Sandarbhas is the Tattva Sandarbha. Tattva means truth. And the first part of Tattva Sandarbha, Jiva Goswami, he examines epistemology. How can we know anything? And he goes, often we hear from Srila Prabhupada, there are three basic ways of knowing. Pratyaksha, direct sense perception. Anumana, which is basically parallel to the modern science method of the inductive method. It's sense perception and then analysis and inference. And the third is Shabda Brahman. Now, Jiva Goswami, Shabda Brahman means hearing from an infallible authority. Jiva Goswami goes into that there are 10 epistemologies. Now, he also reduces them to 3, because most of them can be reduced to some form or combination of Anumana and Prajaksha, inductive method and direct sense perception. For example, one of the 10 epistemologies Jiva Goswami describes is nonverbal and paralinguistic behavior. He really gets into it, because he's just describing the different ways that a living entity can know. And he describes that, well, it's not all sound vibration. By the way someone moves their hand and the way someone moves their eyes, he thought there's different gestures. And we get knowledge from that. And he goes into it. He goes into 10 types. And then, okay, we can see that the nonverbal and paralinguistic behavior, that's an epistemology. And he says, okay, and more or less, that's some combination of pratyaksha, direct sense perception, and anumana, inductive method, right? Because we have a direct sense perception of how someone moves or the tone of their voice, and we make an inference based on our experience and intuition, and so on like that. And okay, so there's quite an extensive section on epistemology, quite brilliant. I mean, I shouldn't even say Jiva Goswami is brilliant, because that's like, who am I to assess Jiva Goswami, you know? So, so Prabhupada said he's the greatest philosopher that ever lived. Okay, so and then through rigorous analysis, he comes to the conclusion that the topmost epistemology is Srimad Bhagavatam. He comes to that conclusion. I could go on and on reading from Prabhupada and, you know, sharing and like that. And I've got plenty here. But I thought, you know, we can, you know, I'm glad to, if anyone wants to share anything at this time. I see something on the screen. I'm not quite understanding what it is. Yes, I see something. Okay, maybe we can, if anyone has any comments or questions at this time. I think we can stop the screen share.
I was wondering if Jiva Goswami goes into the details of the paralinguistics, things that you mentioned, or he just like puts them.
He gives some examples. He gives some examples.
Can you repeat the question from, we don't hear very much from Ramachandra when he speaks somehow.
Okay, so Ramachandra was asking, what extent does Jiva Goswami go into the details of paralinguistics and nonverbal behavior? And from what I remember, he gives some examples. He goes into some detail. He goes into some detail. That's in the Tattva Sandarbha. Yeah, the Tattva Sandarbha is, there's a major section on epistemology establishing Bhagavatam. Then the rest of the Sandarbhas, including, let's call it, the second half, or the second 2/3 of Tattva Sandarbha, the Bhagavat Sandarbha, Paramatma Sandarbha, Krishna Sandarbha, Bhakti Sandarbha, Priti Sandarbha, Sarva Samvadini, and Krama Sandarbha, then that's about ontology. First part's epistemology, how we know, that's called Praman in Sanskrit. And then the rest of the Sandarbhas, including like the second half of Tattva Sandarbha, that's ontology in Sanskrit, that's called Prameya. What is there to be known? What is there to be known? And then the ontology is basically three categories. There's Sambandha, means understanding what are the different parts. Okay, the parts are Jiva, spirit, soul, material energy, and Bhagavan, Sri Krishna. And then, of course, then there's also the Paramatma, who's Sri Krishna's representation to manage material energy. So what are the different parts, and how do they interrelate? And so the second half of Tattva Sandarbha, and then the next three Sandarbhas, they're really pretty much Jiva Goswami, with great rigorous detail, he goes into the Sambandha. So the next one, so this is Tattva Sandarbha, the different truths, the truth of the Jiva Tattva, the truth of Prakriti, the truth of Vishnu Tattva. And then the next one, Bhagavat Sandarbha, then Paramatma Sandarbha, then Krishna Sandarbha. Then the next aspect of ontology is Abhideya. Means, okay, we have these different truths, and then how can we realize truth? What's the action? What's the activity? What's the sadhana? And that's Abhideya. And that's the fifth Sandarbha, Bhakti Sandarbha. So the Abhideya is Bhakti Yoga. And then, okay, so what's the result when the Jiva engages in Bhakti to Bhagavan, to Sri Krishna? What's the result? That's the sixth Sandarbha, that's called Prayojana, the ultimate goal. Ecstatic, joyful love of Godhead. That's the sixth Sandarbha, Priti Sandarbha. So the fifth Sandarbha is Abhideya, the sixth Sandarbha is Prayojana, Bhakti and Priti. Mm. Okay, let's see some chat here. Let's see. Oh, I got it. Okay, very good. Yeah, any other comments or questions?
I have a question about the life of Jiva Goswami.
Okay.
You say, is Anupam son, and I know he died. It's part of the Chaitanya Charitamrita that Lord Chaitanya was very sad to hear about his death. So that's when Jiva Goswami was 10.
Well, I know that Jiva Goswami left home around 10 or 12 years old. We hear that from Srila Prabhupada. And maybe that was, well, I wouldn't think that was, okay, I would think that was before his father's death, because when Anupam died, he was sannyas. And so maybe he died, and that happened to be simultaneous with Jiva's leaving home at 10 or 12. But Jiva Goswami, in a sense, he wouldn't have known when his father died exactly, but he would know when his father left home. So I'm kind of conjecturing here, So, yeah, maybe Prabhupada gives a lecture about that. I'm not exactly sure, but I'm thinking it was maybe simultaneous with when his father left home. Then a year, a few days later, Jiva Goswami said, "Hey, I'm doing that too." It was a few years later. I'm not sure.
And he never had a direct association with Lord Chaitanya, even as a child.
I don't think that's true. I don't think that's true. I mean, that's a good question. I kind of have it somewhere in Chaitanya Charitamrita that maybe like somewhere as a young adult, but I'm conjecturing. We need to study what Prabhupada says. Somewhere as a young adult, I think Jiva Goswami did cross paths with Lord Chaitanya. And maybe Lord Chaitanya sent him to Vrindavan. So I'm saying I think there. So I'm not conclusive about that.
Thank you.
There are some extensive purports where Prabhupada talks about Jiva Goswami. For example, but it's a good question that you sparked my curiosity.
I can research also.
Yeah. Here I'll reference it in Adi Leela Chaitanya Charitamrita, chapter 10, text 85. It's a purport. It's a verse in purport, and there's an extensive purport. And Srila Prabhupada talks a lot about Srila Jiva Goswami. So text 85 of Adi Leela, chapter 10. Tanramaje Rupasana Tana Bada Shaka Anupama Jiva Ragendradi Upasaka. Among these branches, Rupa and Sanatan were principal. Anupam, Jiva Goswami, and others, headed by Rajendra, were their sub-branches. Thank you. In the purport, Prabhupada writes, in the Gora Ganodeshtipika 195, it is stated that Srila Jiva Goswami was formerly Bilas Manjari Gopi. From his very childhood, Jiva Goswami was greatly fond of Srimad Bhagavatam. And I'll just pause it. So the entire Sandarbhas, they're all about Srimad Bhagavatam. It's all about Srimad Bhagavatam. First, it establishes Srimad Bhagavatam is the topmost epistemology, the topmost way to know. And then all the Sandarbhas, and they are extensive. They're all about Srimad Bhagavatam and what Srimad Bhagavatam is saying. He later came to Navadvip to study Sanskrit, and following in the footsteps of Sri Nityananda Prabhu, he circumambulated the entire Navadvip Dham. After visiting Navadvip Dham, he went to Benares to study Sanskrit under Madhusudan Vachaspati, and after finishing his studies in Benares, he went to Vrindavan and took shelter of his uncle Sri Rupan Sanatan. This is described in the Bhakti Ratnakara. So we hear there, related to our discussion, Malini, that he went to Navadvip. Jiva Goswami went to Navadvip. Now, I'm not sure what the year, maybe Lord Chaitanya had already left Navadvip, or maybe he was, I'm not sure, but he said he follows in the footsteps of Sri Nityananda. So I don't know if that means he was accompanying Nityananda in the parikram, but so not completely clear. Prabhupada continues, Srila Jiva, okay, as far as our information goes, Srila Jiva Goswami composed and edited at least 25 books. They are all very much celebrated, and they are listed as follows. 1. Harinamamrita Vyakarana. 2. Sutra Malika. 3. Dhatu Sangraha. 4. Krishnarcha Deepika. 5. Gopal Viruddhav Ali. 6. Rasamrita Shesha. 7. Madhava Mahotsava. 8. Sri Sankalpa Kalpa Vriksha. 9. Bhavarta Suchaka Champu. 10. Gopal Tapani Tika. 11. A commentary on the Brahma Samhita. 12. A commentary on the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. So Jiva Goswami wrote a commentary on his uncle's The Nectar of Devotion. 13. A commentary on the Ujjvala Nilamani, which is another book by Srila Rupa Goswami. 14. A commentary on the Yogasara Stava. 15. A commentary on the Gayatri Mantra as described in the Agni Purana. 16. A description of the Lord's lotus feet derived from the Padma Purana. 17. A description of the lotus feet of Srimati Radharani. 18. Gopal Champu in 2 parts. And 19 to 25, 7 Sandarbhas. The Krama, Tattva, Bhagavat, Paramatma, Krishna, Bhakti, and Priti Sandarbha. After the disappearance of Srila Rupa Goswami and Sanatan Goswami in Vrindavan, Srila Jiva Goswami became the Acharya of all the Vaishnavas in Bengal, Orissa, and the rest of the world. And it is he who used to guide them in their devotional service. In Vrindavan, he established the Radha Damodar temple, where after retirement, we had the opportunity to live from 1962 until 1965, when we decided to come to the United States of America. So just to emphasize, so where Srila Prabhupada was living for several years in the early and mid 60s before he came on the Jaladuta ship, he lived at the Radha Damodar temple, which was established hundreds of years ago by Srila Jiva Goswami. So clearly Prabhupada has a very intimate relationship with Srila Jiva Goswami. When Jiva Goswami was still present, Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami compiled his famous Chaitanya Charitamrita. Later, Srila Jiva Goswami inspired Srinivasacharya Narottama Das Thakur in Bengal. Jiva Goswami was informed that all the manuscripts that had been collected from Vrindavan and sent to Bengal for preaching purposes were plundered near Vishnupura in Bengal, but later he received the information that the books had been recovered. So this is like the first book distribution party. This is the first book distribution party. Yes. Sri Jiva Goswami awarded the designation Kaviraj to Ramachandra Sena, a disciple of Srinivasacharya's, and to Ramachandra's younger brother Govinda. While Jiva Goswami was alive, Srimati Janavi Devi, the pleasure potency of Sri Nityananda Prabhu, went to Vrindavan with a few devotees. Jiva Goswami was very kind to the Gaudiya Vaishnavas, the Vaishnavas from Bengal. Whoever went to Vrindavan, he provided with their residence and prasadam. His disciple Krishnadas Adhikari listed all the books of the Goswamis in his diary. The Sahajiyas level 3 accusations against Srila Jiva Goswami. This is certainly not congenial for the execution of devotional service. The first accusation concerns a materialist who was very proud of his reputation as a great Sanskrit scholar and approached Sri Rupa and Sanatan to argue with them about the revealed scriptures. Srila Rupa Goswami and Sanatan Goswami, not wanting to waste their time, gave him a written statement that he had defeated them in a debate on the revealed scriptures. Taking this paper, the scholar approached Jiva Goswami for a similar certificate of defeat, but Jiva Goswami did not agree to give him one. On the contrary, he argued with him regarding the scriptures and defeated him. Certainly, it was right for Jiva Goswami to stop such a dishonest scholar from advertising that he had defeated Srila Rupa Goswami and Sanatan Goswami, but due to their illiteracy, the Sahajiya class referred to this incident to accuse Srila Jiva Goswami of deviating from the principle of humility. They do not know, however, that humility and meekness are appropriate when one's own honor is insulted, but not when Lord Vishnu or the Acharyas are blasphemed. In such cases, one should not be humble and meek, but must act. So Prabhupada's saying that Sahajiyas, kind of like the fake Vaishnavas, those who pretend that they're, seeing Krishna in the bushes and things like that, that they have 3 accusations against Jiva Goswami, and Prabhupada makes it clear, like, this is not healthy for one's spiritual life to complain about Jiva Goswami. But Prabhupada goes into it just so for our awareness.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
What does Kaviraj mean? Do you know?
Kaviraj? Yeah, well, Raj is like poet or someone who's expert. And Kavi means poet. Raj means king or master. And Kavi means poet. It's like, it's described in the 26 qualities of a devotee that Lord Chaitanya describes for Sanatan Goswami. One of those is that a devotee is Kavi, a poet. So a Kaviraj is a master fully realized spiritual poet. That's Kaviraj. One should follow the example given by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Lord Chaitanya says in his Shikshastaka, Srinadapi Sunechena Taroi Vasahishvana Manina Manadena Kirtanya Sadahari. One can chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, thinking himself lower than the straw in the street. One should be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and should be ready to offer all respect to others. In such a state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. Nevertheless, when the Lord was informed that Nityananda Prabhu was injured by Jagai and Madai, he immediately went to the spot, angry like fire, wanting to kill them. Thus, Lord Chaitanya has explained his verse by the example of his own behavior. One should tolerate insults against oneself, but when there is blasphemy committed against superiors such as other Vaishnavas, one should be neither humble nor meek. One must take proper steps to counteract such blasphemy. This is the duty of a servant of a guru and Vaishnavas. Anyone who understands the principle of eternal servitude to the guru and Vaishnavas will appreciate the action of Srila Jiva Goswami in connection with the so-called scholar's victory over his gurus, Srila Rupa and Srila Sanatan Goswami. Another story fabricated to defame Srila Jiva Goswami states that when Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami showed him the newly completed manuscript of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, Jiva Goswami thought it would hamper his reputation as a big scholar and therefore threw it into a well. Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami was greatly shocked, according to the story, and he died immediately. Fortunately, a copy of the manuscript of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita had been kept by a person named Mukunda, and therefore later it was possible to publish the book. This story is another ignominious example of blasphemy against the Guru and Vaishnava. Such a story should never be accepted as authoritative. So Prabhupada just saying that story is false. The story about defeating the traveling scholar is true, but to interpret it that it shows a lack of humility on Jiva Goswami's part, that's a misinterpretation. According to another accusation, Srila Jiva Goswami did not approve of the principles of the Parakya Ras of Rajadam, and therefore supported Svakya Ras, showing that Radha and Krishna are eternally married. Actually, when Jiva Goswami was alive, some of his followers disliked the Parakya Ras of the gopis. Therefore, Srila Jiva Goswami, for their spiritual benefit, supported Svakya Ras, for he could understand that Sahajis would otherwise exploit the Parakya Ras, as they are actually doing at the present moment. Unfortunately, in Vrindavan and Navadvip, it has become fashionable among Sahajiyas in their debauchery to find an unmarried sexual partner to live with to execute so-called devotional service in Parakya Ras. Foreseeing this, Srila Jiva Goswami supported Svakya Ras, and later all the Vaishnavacharyas also approved of it. Srila Jiva Goswami was never opposed to the transcendental Parakya Ras, nor has any other Vaishnav disapproved of it. Srila Jiva Goswami strictly followed his predecessor gurus and Vaishnavas, Srila Rupa Goswami and Sanatan Goswami, and Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami accepted him as one of his instructor gurus. Hare Krishna, Srila Jiva Goswami ki. Any sharing, question, comments?
I had a question.
You can speak loud enough for everyone to
I
hear.
had a question like there. It mentions the Trinadapi's verse, and I've heard different translations say that you're supposed to offer respect and not demand respect for yourself. But in this translation, it doesn't have to demand respect for yourself. I've heard other.
One should chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, thinking himself lower than the strongest tree. One should be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and should be ready to offer all respect to others. In such a state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. So the term, I've seen it translated in different ways too. The term devoid of all sense of false prestige, for me, that's equivalent to one should demand or desire no respect for oneself.
So it's translated. It's added, I guess, in certain circumstances, just to kind of like elaborate on that meaning. Like not to demand respect on yourself, it's just to try to elaborate on what that means.
Yes. Okay. It's like sometimes we'll see, sometimes in purports, Prabhupada will give a translation, an English translation of a Bhagavad Gita verse that's not exactly the same English translation that he gave in his Bhagavad Gita. And the essence is the same, but emphasizing different points. Namachan?
Yeah, I was
She
wondering.
could speak loud enough for everyone to hear.
I was wondering if you would like to, I thought to ask you to share perhaps what do you know about these two incidents? Like there was an incident, or not an incident, but that Jiva Goswami made a book that in Papa he mentions that he was to pacify the caste Brahmins. Was it like the Bhagavad Gita?
I think that's Sanatan Goswami.
Okay.
That's Sanatan. Yeah.
And then there was Jiva Goswami, he compiled the alphabet according to Christian themes or something like that.
Yes. Yeah. Jiva Goswami, he wrote a grammar book for learning Sanskrit grammar. That's correct. He wrote a grammar book. My understanding it's still used today for teaching Sanskrit. And in all his examples, he has Krishna in the center. Correct. Yeah, Jiva Goswami. It's called Karana or something. He wrote a book of Sanskrit grammar with Krishna in the center of all of the examples.
Mm.
Thanks.
I had a question around that, dear Govinda. At the beginning, you were sharing how Srila Jiva Goswami is the greatest scholar of all age, of all time. And you know, like, I have my own response to my own question, because everything in the spiritual world, there is no comparison ever.
Yeah.
It's just like you have something good, and something else is really good, and something else is perfect, and something is also perfect. And I was sharing that in regard to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, who is called the greatest scholar of all time also.
Right. Well, I don't see a contradiction there. I mean, we can imagine that maybe when Prabhupada talks that way about Jiva Goswami, he's simply quoting his spiritual master. Probably, yeah, I can imagine he heard it from Bhaktisiddhanta, so he's not comparing. And then, yeah, and like there's even like scholars not in our line, not exactly in our line. Scholar is maybe some Vaishnava, maybe some not Vaishnava, over the centuries, and they are referring to Jiva Goswami as the greatest philosopher and scholar of all time. So Prabhupada, like, when his service is to emphasize the greatness of Jiva Goswami, he'll use their language. You know, he's using their language. Sometimes his mood is to emphasize Bhaktisiddhanta's inconceivable learning, and he'll describe his spiritual master Bhaktisiddhanta as was known as the walking encyclopedia, you know, like that. So it's not like it started with Prabhupada to call Jiva Goswami the greatest scholar of all time. There are many Sanskrit scholars over the centuries who did that. So Prabhupada, he's kind of like referring to them. Like, look what everyone's saying about Jiva Goswami. So he's obviously not doing a comparison. Yeah, they're both really inconceivable to what we can conceive. Scholars, Bhaktisiddhanta and Jiva Goswami, and sometimes Prabhupada's glorifying one and sometimes the other.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for a fascinating presentation of the Sandarbha. I know you didn't touch even a drop of a drop of drop. Still, it was fascinating. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. The Prabhupada ki jai. Devaraj Goswami ki jai. Goswami ki jai. Hare Krishna.
Bye. Thank you very much. So you will speak about Srila Jiva Goswami again tomorrow night?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Oh.
Bye bye.